Hey, I'm Kate Clarity and I'm a singer and a writer. And today we're going to help you figure out how to be a successful artist. And these are going to be some real pillars, 11 ways, 11 key pillars, I think, that you need to tend to in order to really find deep success. And we're going to be very ambitious here. We're going to take you from 0 to 60. And it's a joy for me to do this because I've been at this a long time. The one thing I can tell you is that the life of the artist is not easy. It is not for the faint-hearted, but it is rich and beautiful and worthwhile. And I would love to be able to help you reach some of your goals a lot quicker and to have more of these things in place to really thrive as an artist. So let's start. One little caveat to start with is just the way that I would define success. It doesn't exclude the success that most people think of when that word comes to mind, doing the numbers, making a living, maybe becoming really well known in your genre, in your field. But I would say that the core success of an artist is being able to authentically live out the real calling, even vocation that it is to be an artist from the inside out, that you can be so gifted and trained and stable in your craft that you can accomplish what is in your heart to do and reach the people it's for. That to me is the primary form of success that interests me. And yes, it takes some other things for that to be able to flow out into the other forms of success, which I don't think are incompatible with this primary one. But the reality is that the whole world has lots of things that go viral and are very successful from a worldly perspective. It doesn't mean they're valuable. It doesn't mean that they leave a long-term, healthy, good, meaningful impact on people. So if you're a real artist, I think you're going to come alongside with my definition of success. And that whole framework, trying to bring those two together, both that fulfillment of the vocation and real success in the world. That's what this is about today. So the first step to being a successful artist is that you have to develop your craft. And a lot of people don't really understand this or prioritize it. And the reality is we live in a world that does reward mediocrity. And so if your only concern, and that's why this definition of success is so important for me to share, if your primary concern is only hitting numbers, then I would even recommend you go and do mediocre art. But if you're a real artist, that's not what you want, and it will not satisfy you, and you will not be happy with yourself. The only people who can do that are inauthentic people who disconnect from their real inner gifting. And I don't believe if you're here that that's something you want. So becoming a real artist who can make a meaningful effect on the world involves going really deep into developing your craft. And there are no shortcuts to this. It takes time, attention, energy, humility, a lot of things, a lot of training, a lot of concrete, simple things that are accessible, but that most people won't do. But it's critical that even if you have that natural gifting, that you have the ability and the humility to understand that it's not really enough. You have to develop it. You have to be trained well. You have to put in the time. You have to become the fullest version of what that natural gifting is an indication of, because you partner with your own capacity in becoming the artist you're meant to be. So no matter how intuitive your artistic gift is, everybody needs means of development. And I would say that there are 3 of these. One is organically through time, practice, and exposure to good things. So just so those of you who don't know me here, we do things analog over here because that's what brings me a lot of life. And so that's how I'm always looking at my notes here. So you have to engage with good art. This is one of the reasons there is a really strong argument to be had in favor of the classics, because the classics are tried, tested, and true kinds of works that have been appreciated over the long haul. And it's not simply because they're older that they're better, but because the things that tend to survive over time are usually worth paying attention to. Because one generation might be caught up in mediocrity, like I believe ours often is, but hundreds of years of generations, likely not. And there's just something very powerful about that many different kinds of people still appreciating a work. And so digging into the classics, I highly recommend. But generally, it's just allowing yourself to be formed in your tastes, in your recognition of what's good through exposure. And I would say as an artist, you should explore that in all kinds of media. I love going to museums and spending a lot of time with paintings. I love reading good books. But fundamentally, I'm a musician and a songwriter, which is a very different medium from all of these other things that I feel that I have truly benefited from. Some people may know this about me, but I have my master's in theology and classic philosophy. And that has been one of the richest things I could have done as a songwriter. I'm not going to share more about that right now, but it's just an example of the kinds of things that are worth digging into in order to become great at what you do. It's really important that it all adds up. And there's no replacing the time and the attention and the practice to become great. So don't neglect that. Number 2 is technical skills and training. So yes, there's a lot you can do just kind of organically on your own. That as a singer, a lot of what I learned was through some really beautiful opportunities, but a lot of it was just, I remember it was kind of novel to be able to record myself on a tape. And I would listen to songs on the radio and then try to mimic the runs or the way that someone was kind of throwing their voice. And I just did that intuitively because it was fun and I wanted to be able to do it. And that's how I learned. But there's really a time and a place too, wherever possible, to look into skills and training. And for example, me just having a great English teacher just by happenstance, who I would say burned out the mixed metaphors and the cliches that I already had a tendency toward when I was 16, 17. And he was pretty hard on me, and I'm glad he was, because I haven't really written in that way since that time because of that. And it's really important to have that kind of encounter with real skill. A good analogy is, for example, you're cooking pasta and you are trying to get it out of a pot with a teaspoon, right? If you don't have good tools, it doesn't matter how good the thing is you're trying to get out. You have to get the right tools in place to be able to do what you're best at. And I look at a lot of training and skills that way, that there might be something wonderful in you that needs to get out, and it's real and it's good, but you have to have the skills and the training to be able to translate it out. And every bit of that you can add on as an artist will make you a better artist. And it's really important. A lot of people neglect this. And I see this a lot, especially in the visual arts, painting. I find there's a lot of sentimentality. And even though I can look at something and say, this person has a gift for the visual arts, there's something there that's worth cultivating. But unfortunately, especially if people are in kind of insular communities, they'll just get the positive feedback and they don't ever really expand because they're only self-taught. And I'm just not someone who thinks that that's enough. I think there's a lot that can be done that way. I think if that's what you have access to, self-teach as much, especially when it comes to a YouTube age where you can hop on and learn things that way. And that I almost wouldn't say is self-taught, though you're engaging the expertise of other people, which we have now in this time. But you do have to engage deeply with craft if in a technical capacity, if you want to really become what you're supposed to be and really create something unique and beautiful and real. I would even recommend, if it's available to you, to go take a class. And it can be hard to find really good artistic courses these days. A lot of people have different ideas about what it is to be an artist and to share skill and to grow skills. But I would say it's still valuable because obviously find the best one you can, but it's still valuable because let's say you take a class for 12 weeks and you get one key pointer that changes your life. And I've had that kind of thing happen a lot. And it's also why I think, we'll get into it a little bit later, you have to be open to the feedback loop if you want to be good. And people aren't perfect feedback loops and classes aren't perfect. But if you're paying attention and you're listening with your heart and your own concurrent development as an artist from an organic perspective, you will be able to pull pieces from what people are saying and challenge yourself and incorporate these key things that could change the whole trajectory of your life as an artist. And that I don't mean as an exaggeration at all. One key critique, skill, phrase about your craft can change everything. So you have to be open to that. One other thing that I think is critically important is having mentors and artistic friends also, but I'm going to get into that a little bit more in a section down the line. Number 2, for how to become a successful artist, I'm sure you knew this was coming, is learn entrepreneurial skills. So you're working hard on your craft, and it's not worth it if you're not working hard on your craft. But the entrepreneurial side of things is really important. And I know a lot of artists struggle with this. And it is because that if you are a real artist, you understand that the focus should be your craft, should be focusing on what is in you to give and bringing that to bear in the world. And I have every sympathy with that. But I will say that the risk of being so discouraged by not understanding this part of the game is so high that you might abandon your art. And I think it happens a lot. And so as early as possible in your journey, but also it's never too late, as early as possible in your life as an artist, you need to dig deep into these entrepreneurial skills. Having said that, I will never, ever advocate for compromising your art or your integrity for a bottom line. Those things are not the same thing. When I talk about learning entrepreneurial skills, what I most mean is understanding how to translate your work out and get it to the people it's for. As a result of that, you're much more likely to find financial success on a spectrum, of course, from making a living to maybe becoming a household name. But the point is that your art matters. What you create matters. And so if you can learn some of the skills that get it out to the world, that is profound. I would not be where I am at all without having worked really hard on learning all kinds of skills right from jump, right from the beginning. As soon as I was able, I was learning the basics of recording and sound. And that's still not my forte, but understanding it has opened so many doors for me. I've been able to produce some of my own music, and it also makes it easier for me to work in the studio. But things like websites and marketing and even just the mundane things about what it is to run a business, even getting inside of just the basics of what would I have to do to be able to make a living at this? What would that look like? What kind of things do I have to make available? How can I share myself in such a way that it's valuable to people from a monetary perspective? Those are all good questions to be asking. So I'm not going to get too deep into that specifically today, but there's just so much to learn. There's so much online, and it's really good to treat yourself like an entrepreneur some of the time, at least. Just think about yourself more like a business. And again, never with compromising your art. And we have a very unique calling as artists to balance this integrity, this core thing that we're doing, that we're called to, with the entrepreneurial side of it. And it's not easy. I'm not going to pretend it's easy, but I will say that the sooner you can do that, the better, because it is the reason that I'm sitting here before you today, is that I learned enough entrepreneurial skills to get to where I am now. Number 3 of how to become a successful artist is you have to develop a contemplative inner world. It's really important. If you have nothing in the well, there's nothing to draw from. You have to fill it up. And for an artist, you need quiet. You need to find ways to develop quiet in your life. So yes, this does require some external space and quiet. I know that's harder depending on what your jobs are, what your lifestyle is, where you are, if you've got children. I know all of those things really do change the game quite a bit. And I have every sympathy with that, but I think whatever you can do, whatever you can grasp at, I think the starting point is recognizing that you need that if you're going to be able to produce something worthwhile, something fruitful, something that has the essence of what's real in it. Again, we're driving against the mediocrity that we see often. We're talking about creating something real and true to your unique calling as an artist, and you won't be able to access that without recognizing that it needs cultivation. So I don't know what that's going to look like for you. For a lot of people, that just means getting off your phone. Like some of us have lots of time and just need to get off your phone and go out into nature and go for a walk and spend some time reading quietly or just thinking and journaling. Those kinds of things are so valuable. And if you're not carving out space, there's not much to draw from. So you have to really commit to that. And I'm a Catholic, and I really value prayer. And so I really recommend that if that's something you're open to, but even just forms of just being quiet with beautiful things, just thinking about beautiful things, thinking about life, thinking about relationships, thinking about God, thinking about nature, thinking about your childhood. All of these things become just beautiful sources of inspiration, and you need them. Number 4 for how to become a successful artist is to develop your own voice. And that applies to singers, of course, but it's a term we use for writing, for painting, for any kind of medium. And it's quite connected, I would say, with the last point about cultivating that contemplative inner world. But it's a bit of a nuanced discussion that's hard to articulate, but it's really one of the most important things that you have to learn to do over the course of time as an artist. And it does take time. And it takes time because you have to first learn from the masters in your craft. You have to be humble enough to recognize that you come alongside towards something original first by just becoming excellent and recognizing the patterns that make for something worthwhile in an artistic work. So, for example, this is standard for academic dissertation. So some of you may know this, but I am working on my doctoral dissertation. And the main thing that makes it passable is that you offer a real and unique contribution to your field. But everybody who is humble enough to see this the right way understands that it's usually a tiny contribution, because it takes a long time to build the case from all of the masters that have gone before and have articulated the things that you use as stepping stones, as a ladder, I guess, to the heights of what you want to say. And it's a beautiful, beautiful thing in the intellectual world to pursue truth that way. And it's a similar thing in the arts, which is why I'm sharing it. So there's a C.S. Lewis quote where he talks about how you simply saying the truth as you, in an authentic way, is already fresh and novel. And I think that that's the best way to look at your art. And that's a paraphrase. But I think some people become very concerned with trying to be novel, trying to be unique, trying to have a voice. But instead, it's really this subtle, nuanced, organic process over time where you start to see the little flickers of the things that make you unique. And that has to happen, but it has to happen organically. Over time, you'll start to see what sets you apart and what is just organically unique about you. And then you can start to lean into that more and more as time goes on, which is just a really cool experience, I have to say. The antithesis of this to me is affectation. So for singers right now, it's very common for everybody want to try to sound unique, which is basically doing this weird affected lisping singing that is nothing like the way they talk. It's just this sort of put on affectation for a genre. And it's very common in indie music, for example, and it's even quite popular. But to me, it's always bothered me because it's so obviously inauthentic to the person. Whereas what I want, my mom always just said, just sing it. And there was so much wisdom in that, because if you just sing the song, but you, with your own unique biology and everything, and experiences, emotional palette, all of it, you bring that to the song, it's already unique. And then, like I said, over time, you can turn up the volume a little on those things that make it, that you recognize are organically unique. But I really discourage anyone from just putting on affectations because they're trying to sound unique. It's a very different thing. Developing your own voice it's foundational, and it's really important that you are striving toward, over time, to having something that is undeniably you. And I think in my own experience from the feedback I get with my singing is that I do actually have a unique voice, but no one would describe it as a strange voice. There's a classic kind of quality to it. This is what people will tell me. And I do think that a lot of that is because I just was willing to just sing, like my mom said, and to learn, yes, to mimic the singers that I admired to a large degree and learn how they were doing things, learn the skills, learn the craft. But over time, there are things that do emerge in the quality of my voice that are unique. And I think that if you curtail that process by trying too soon to just sound unique or important or different, then you might never discover the real things that would make you unique. Number 5 pillar to keep in mind that will help you become a successful artist is that everyone needs an editor. Everyone needs an editor. And I have seen so much talent go to waste because it's not been properly challenged, that you really do need a feedback loop that helps you understand where your weak spots are and where you need to improve. There's an author I actually really love, and I'm not going to say who it is, but he refused an editor. And I understand why. I have a lot of sympathy for this, because I will also say that your editors have to be people. And by editors, I mean people giving you real, constructive, helpful feedback. They have to be people who are inside of what you're doing, who really get it, who really appreciate it, who love what you do, and then can help you from that place tweak according to the way you would approach it if you could be more objective, which is very difficult with your own art. But with this particular writer, I would even say the quality of his work approaches the greats like Dostoevsky. But there are moments where things like a bit of too much of a moralism comes through that is inauthentic to the work or to the characters. And I still remember even one of my favorite books of his, there were a few moments where that happened, and it broke the spell. It broke the magic of what art is, because it was forced. And a good editor would have caught that for him. And I like I said, I understand why he didn't really want to do it that way. Because if you can't find someone who understands your work, they're not going to get it, and they're going to have all kinds of critiques that are not valuable, that can just be very confusing to you as an artist. Because an editor isn't someone with veto power. You are the one who ultimately decides what input to take in and to value. But I think it's unwise to not hope for and go after opportunities to collaborate with someone who can give you real and helpful feedback. And this also it's kind of like when I was talking about pursuing training or trying to mimic the masters a bit, that there are little pointers that can sometimes change the whole trajectory of your life if you're humble enough to listen. Someone might give you 10 critiques and only like 2% of one of them really lands for you, but that can really change the way you write, for example, forever. I've had a lot of experiences like that. And so it's worth listening, but you have to keep it in balance with your own intuition as an artist, which is not easy. This is one of the hardest things I would say as an artist, because there are also times where I've allowed someone I really respected to critique something of mine and discourage me from ever doing it. So for example, I had a writing mentor who gently but convincingly told me that I should just focus on writing songs, and what I derived from what he said was that I shouldn't pursue poetry, even though I had a real passion for it and I was really enjoying it. And I think he was wrong. I think he was just dead wrong about that. And but he succeeded in kind of taking me away from that for a while. And I've never quite gotten back to it in the same way. And that's not to complain. It's just to say that you have to be very wise in how you approach critique and people who you're allowing to edit your work and even your body of work or your approach to your work. And you have to be willing to be open, but you also have to be wise in discerning ultimately how you take in that criticism, critique, and integrate it, or don't. That's always up to you. Number 6 is you have to experience life. You have to. You need material for your art. And that can take different forms. There are a lot of artists who you see this in biographies of a lot of great writers. They were always traveling for 6 months to South America or to Paris or to Asian countries just to experience different things, different cultures, different people. There's something about the imagination that needs a bit of stimulation by change in environment sometimes. And it really depends on the person. But for a lot of people, that is actually a really important piece of the puzzle. And for me, I have found that. Different kinds of events, different people, moving cities, all these kinds of things are potential forms that can take. And I have a lot of stories like that where I just watched parts of myself come alive while spending time in a different country, a different environment. Moving to California was a really big deal for me. I'm originally from Canada in a small city there called Saskatoon, but I loved coming to California, and it just felt like I just felt this incredible experience of expansion being here, and it really changed so much for me as an artist. But having said that, the most important thing is actually just attentiveness to reality. You have to, more important than just going around everywhere and just doing a lot of things, especially when you understand the importance of that need for quiet that we talked about, is just really being attentive to reality. You've got people like Tolkien, who wrote these incredible works about foreign lands and everything that have become famous and world-changing, absolutely world-changing stories. And my understanding is that he barely left home. I think he was a soldier in the war, so there would have been some deep experiences there that formed him. But you don't have to travel if you don't have to travel. Some people feel like they have to travel, and I think that there's an argument for that. But I think the most important thing is just really being engaged with life, being really present. A certain kind of, I would say, thoughtfulness and presence needs to be characterizing your life. And so I would say dig deep into everything that nourishes you. Relationships, books, stories, art, film, nature. It's all fodder. It's all material for your mind and your heart and your intuition. And over time, especially if those things are high quality, you will find that there's a lot more to draw from that makes you a much better artist. Number 7 is build a hand-picked network of artists whose work, that's the important part, whose work you respect. And this is different than taste. You don't have to like what they do necessarily, but you have to respect the level of excellence that they are living out via their craft. And there are 3 categories of these artists that I think you should pay attention to. I would say mentors, collaborators, and friends. In general, just having mentors who can guide you through the process. There's so much that you need to share in, and that it's hard to share with peers sometimes, but that you can really be encouraged in and by in someone like that who's ahead of you in the game. I would also say collaborators, so just people that you can work with meaningfully on projects with. And especially for most artists, a lot of artists don't have a big budget to go and hire. And so if you can find people where you can mutually benefit each other by working on projects together, it's an amazing way to really dig deeper into your craft and become more of who you want to be. But even from a perspective of people to pay, it actually is really hard to find collaborators that you feel match your quality, perhaps, or your artistic sensibility, or who understand your work enough to be able to capture it or translate it. Like, for example, I'm a singer, so the producers I work with are really important. If they don't understand what I'm going for, it's going to be a really difficult project, right? Whereas if people intuitively grasp what I'm going for, it's just so easy and so joyful. And so even just finding people that are excellent, even when you are paying them, is not always easy. So it's really important to build that network of people, because the more people you know, the more people you have to ask when you have a need for collaboration. Third is just friends, whose work you respect. So people who are in the trenches with you, who can give you real feedback with nuance, because they're inside of it. They have a taste that you respect, even if they're not in your medium. A lot of artists, if they're good, will have a developed sense of taste and excellence that they can apply to almost every genre of art. And you'll also be inspired by them because they're doing it with you. And that kind of community around you is critically important. One of my mentors as well, it's one of the reasons I ended up in LA, although I always wanted to move to California. I came here, even though I'd wanted to for a long time, but what actually gave me the final push to come and really fight for it was that he said I needed an ecosystem of artists around me. And that is what I found here. And it's been tremendous. I mean, it's not some perfect story, but there is just something really powerful about being around a lot of creative people who understand who you are and what you're doing from the inside. And you can't really replace that. And now I should say, great friends are amazing too, simply. You don't need every support system to be somebody who understands your artistic work. In fact, most people in your life won't, and that's okay. It's actually not that important from a certain angle, as long as you have those people who do understand your artistic life as well, so that you know where to talk to who about what. So yes, there are wonderful friends who just love you and can appreciate your work, but it's going to be difficult to explain your struggles to. But they can still love you and support you in so many ways that are so important. And of course, if you can find someone who has both of those in your life, you have struck absolute gold. And I have to say, I'm very fortunate because I have quite a few of those as well. But friendship for sure, just with good people, and also recognizing that sometimes the artistic friends that can give you the nourishment you need as an artist, are not always going to be people that you have a natural friendship in other ways. And that's okay. Like, you can recognize the limits of different kinds of relationships, and that will be a huge asset to you, to just make sure you're cultivating that community around you. And this takes time. For me, it took a lot of living all over the place and meeting a lot of people. But the nice thing is that life is kind of like algorithms. So once you know a few people who you do find really inspiring and whose work you respect, it becomes an avenue for finding a lot more other good things and good people. So just start to try to cultivate a community like that, and it will really help you and be a huge, irreplaceable asset as an artist. Number 8 is a funny and obvious one, I think, but it's take care of your health. I don't know what it is about artists, but we have a tough time. I think there's a lot of melancholy in a lot of artists. You know, Aristotle says to see is to suffer. So a lot of artists, if you do have this real artistic gift, it's often because you do more easily sense the heartbeat of the world, and you're intact. You're in contact with that in a deep way, but it can make the practical parts of life quite hard. And I think one of the things that falls into that is just taking care of your health. Like, just, there's so many things that we think are because of sorrow and sadness that are often just just that we don't eat enough protein or get enough sleep or take care of ourselves. So this isn't a health channel, so I'm not going to hyper focus on it. But the truth is that even if you're very confident in your craft, when you don't take care of your body and your health in the way that you need, it eats away at your confidence in other areas. And that has a real long-term effect on your ability not just to get your work out to the world in more of these entrepreneurial ways that can take a lot of attention, but even just being able to follow through on creating the thing you want to create. And without good health, look, I've had to struggle through a lot of health things, health difficulties, challenges. And look, the other side of the coin is that you just have to create no matter what's going on. You're never going to have a perfectly ideal circumstance. But even if you're very confident in the art itself, if you haven't taken good care of your health, it's going to be really, really difficult to have the confidence in all the other areas of your life that help you actually create the things you want to create and get them out. And so that can really lead to even a self-sabotage kind of situation where you don't seem to have the ability to follow through or take the risks you need to take or form key relationships that could change your life. And it's certainly not the most important thing in the world. One of my favorite thinkers is Barbara Sher, and she talks about how feeling good is not really the most important thing to doing what's in your heart to do, but rather that network of people around you that help you solve the problems to get there. But it still makes a huge difference. And I know as well as anybody that often a bit of sorrow can be quite conducive to the muse. It can be a very creative space. And I don't think we should pretend that that's not part of life, because I think it is a huge part of life, and it's part of what the artist brings to the world, is processing a lot of that shared sorrow into beautiful works of art that can help people understand themselves and the world better. But there's also a lot of beauty that can come from joy and stability, and a lot of that can come from just sleeping enough, eating enough protein, working on your circadian rhythm, trying to get a good sleep at decent times a day, going outside, and movement, like just getting your body moving, because we are body and soul, and it of course affects us creatively. I would say in particular, walking is known to be very creatively restorative, and I suggest that if that's an option for you. Number 9 of these pillars to becoming a successful artist is you have to choose courage and take a lot of risks. And I'm not going to say you take every risk possible. You have to be prudent, you have to be thoughtful about it, but I will also say that if you're not taking risks, I don't think you're going to get anywhere where you want to go. Life takes courage, but especially as an artist, it's a muscle, and you have to be using it often in all areas of your life to see progress. And I guess for this one, what I most want to share is just some of my own stories, because there's no way that I would have done anything that I've done without really choosing courage repeatedly. And I'm not going to pretend it always went well. It didn't always go well. but it went well often enough that it got me to where I am. And so some examples of that were I was on Canadian Idol when I was 16. I remember getting up at 4 a.m. or whatever it was and going to do these auditions. I was so nervous, and I got through to Toronto for the top 100, and I got through the first couple of rounds there. And, you know, it was amazing. It was so important and foundational for me to do that. I also recorded my first album. I took a huge risk on that. I didn't know if the funding was going to come in that I had applied to, and I just really, truly in faith believed that it was going to work out. And I gave up my whole summer. I didn't work a different job. Instead, I just trusted I was going to have what I needed to do it. And because of that album, I had something when I met the record label years later. And then working with the record label was a huge risk, and in lots of ways, you know, putting your heart on the line, your vulnerability with your songs, having to travel to different countries and work with different people and be in a lot of uncomfortable situations. I mean, this stuff is not, like I said at the beginning, the life of the artist is not for the faint of heart. And then again, moving to California was a big risk. Performing always felt like it took a lot of courage, especially in my very young years. I remember when I was 14, crying on our couch in our living room to my mom because I was so nervous about performing at one of the events at school. And I don't know how she talked me through that and how I got over it. But I think if I hadn't gotten through that, I don't know if I would have ever ended up being who I am and performing all over the world like I have. So all these little bits of courage really matter. And I've done crowd funds that changed my life too, that let me do all kinds of amazing creative things. And yeah, they're very vulnerable. It's very hard to put yourself out there and not know if you're selling something to people that they want. But look, there's no way forward without that. But that is also, with a lot of these things, I will say that this is why it's also really helpful to be taking into account all of these pillars, because when you're taking care of your health and you have a good skill set entrepreneurially and you know who you are as an artist and those kinds of things, and you're gaining confidence, it makes it a lot easier and easier to take reasonable, courageous risks with your time and your talent. Number 10, pillar to becoming a successful artist, is that you have to know in your bones that you shouldn't be looking to your immediate circles as your main support. There will be people who love you and love what you do, who will be absolute backbones to your life, who will support you and show up and encourage you at the right moments. And that's amazing. And I don't want to pretend that that's not been a huge part of my life, because it has been, but it really should be treated as a bonus, because you have to understand, most of the people that you think of as close to you, who you think you want to share your work with, and who would be the natural means of support. And by support, I mean lots of things, like the people maybe who might buy your stuff, but also just people following on social media who you think would want to support you and like and comment and be engaged with what you're doing, share your work with their friends. The problem is that it's not always really a negative thing. It's just, if you have to think of the people in your life are a cross section of all kinds of things. I mean, we're talking about family and friends from, you know, like your boxing club or whatever. These people are not necessarily going to have any natural interest in what you do. And that's not their fault. There's nothing wrong with that. Your stuff is not for everybody. That's one of the best things to learn, is your art is not for everybody. And if you think just in a really neutral way that most of the people around you are just a cross section of people, of course most of them are not going to be your natural audience. And so the faster you can learn that, the better, because it can be very, very discouraging when you expect a certain kind of response from the people who know you, and you're not finding that. Many will be kind and try to support you, but again, what you want is not people who are tolerating what you're doing, but who are actually really excited about what you're doing and are thrilled that you're doing what you're doing. Those are the people you want to go after, and often that's not going to be in your immediate circle. Like I said, some of them will be, and you should be really grateful for those, and certainly don't ignore those. But yeah, it's just important to keep that in mind. Another thing to keep in mind, and this is quite rare, but it's common enough that it's worth mentioning, is that you're also going to find a more likely proclivity to things like jealousy and even undermining your work in circles of people that know you, and not necessarily the people closest to you really love you, but just outside that circle. There's just human psychology is a very odd thing, and it's just wise to be aware of it. And it's also why sometimes it's just not the best to be sharing everything right away with that immediate kind of circle, more immediate kind of circle, people just outside that inner circle. It's like I said, it's not tremendously common, at least in my experience, but it's common enough that you have to be aware. And some of these people tend, I've had this experience, some of these people are close enough to see you and kind of weirdly admire you, but start copying or mimicking your work or your style or different things you talk about, and not crediting you. And that can be very, very discouraging. Or people that are going to, sabotage you in a variety of ways. And like I said, human psychology is very interesting. It's not really the forte of this channel, but people even don't understand themselves why they're doing what they're doing. They're not really connected with their own motivations. And so this is something to be aware of. But I think the flip you want to make is to focus always on who you think your audience actually is. And this is where some of those entrepreneurial skills are going to come in handy, because the way that a marketing mind thinks of it is it's the target, the person that you're trying to think of, or the group of kind of people who are going to be most excited about what you do. And there's some real value in that. And it's going to often be people who share a lot of interests who are like you, actually. So that's a good way to be thinking about it. And you have to understand that you and your work are not for everybody. And that the people it's for, however, will be thrilled. And those are always the people you want to be keeping in mind. Not your mom's 68-year-old cousin who only listens to Bach, if you're a pop singer. You just have to understand that that's not going to be the natural person who will like what you do. And it doesn't mean that there's something wrong with them. It doesn't mean there's something wrong with your work. It's just there's a mismatch. And there's a whole world of people out there who want what you have to give that's unique and special. So it's why it's so important to go deep and really know what you are about, who you are, and then just do it with those people in mind. You do need some audience feedback, and maybe that's a topic for another video. But it has to be an audience whose taste you respect. Kind of like when you're picking artistic friends and collaborators, you have to really respect their work and what they do. And if you think about your audience, you're like, would I respect their opinion? Like what's the audience whose opinion I would care about with regard to my art? And that helps a lot. If you think, if I'm trying to appeal to someone who isn't someone whose opinion in this area I really care about, that doesn't make sense, right? So you want to be really connected to that. And just as a side note, this is also why sometimes for a lot of people from a social media perspective, it's really useful to start a fresh social media presence, because the algorithms are actually quite amazing in helping you find the kind of people who love who you are and what you do. And sometimes the algorithms reflect, if you're just starting from a personal account where you have more of that normal cross-section of people in your life, they might love you, but they're also going to scroll by your stuff, which is a bad input for the algorithm. And it's actually helpful because the algorithm reflects actually a lot of real life as well. That if you try to make that the substance of your circles and your support system for your art, you're going to run into a lot of struggles, because as much as people want to love you, what you actually need is not people who are going to pat you on the head, but people who are going to be enthusiastic about who you are and what you're doing. So fight for them. The final point, number 11, for becoming a successful artist is that you have to develop the muscle of perseverance. And virtue generally, which is another great topic I'd love to share, just trying to be someone who has real character. Being an artist takes everything. Being a real artist and fighting to succeed in all of these ways we've talked about really takes character. And a huge reason for that is that quick success is rare. It just is. It happens. I would say it happens even less frequently if you think about people who are really living up to the vocational calling of an artist. Even in that case, perseverance is always needed. So a good thing to recognize and just sort of square with as an artist is that part of the vocation is the suffering and the difficulty. So again, what Aristotle says about to see is to suffer, the reality of the artist is that there is usually this tremendous sensitivity to the world, to people, to stories, to reality. And that is a precious thing that becomes an incredible inner world from which to draw and create beautiful things for the world that change the world. But there is a cost, and I think it's helpful to just know that about it from the outset, to know that to be an artist is to accept this reality of difficulty and challenge and suffering. And then in response to that, you can have the courage and the perseverance to live it out despite that reality, instead of trying to escape it. Just recognize, oh, this means I have to be a strong person who perseveres through all of these difficult moments and times. Because there will be many setbacks, many disappointments, many bewilderments, and even things like betrayals. I've had lots of stories like that. I'm grateful, not so much for me personally, but for artists. Yeah, there's just really difficult things that will happen along the way, and it's best to just know that that's coming. It's a part of it. It's normal, and you have to be a strong person to fight through that. There are also going to be many almosts. I have so many stories. I had this huge tour booked where I was going to make a lot of money, be in front of incredible people who could change my life, big, influential people with a lot of money, a lot of clout, and the plug got pulled on it. And it's just part of the story. It had nothing to do with me. It was just incidental. But these kind of things happen a lot. I worked with the record label, and this was a really impressive person that I got to work with, who had worked with big pop stars in the 90s. And in the end, it was a huge blessing, but I also have the question of, was it wasted years, right? I don't know. Maybe I wouldn't have as impressive of a story to tell in some ways, but maybe I would have been more focused on the business side of things and developed a better following online if I'd had more time sooner, right? Who knows? There's no way of knowing, but it's just the nature of the beast, is to have the perseverance to go after the opportunities before you and to know that you're going to keep going no matter what happens. And one of the things that can be most helpful in this regard for us is to just learn the stories of entrepreneurs and artists, because if you read a few of those, you'll just understand that this is just how it is. And if you want to fight for your life as an artist, you have to know that, and you have to know it's a fight, and go in recognizing that you're not a freak or a failure for experiencing all of these things, but actually just part of a pretty amazing club of people that think it's worth fighting for your dreams. So keep that in mind always. So these are the 11 pillars I came up with that I think you really need to be successful as an artist. And I'd love to hear anything you want to share in response to this, because I think having a conversation in the comments is something that can be really fruitful. So please share if you'd like to. And just know that I really believe that if you have an artistic gift, a real artistic gift, the world needs it, and it's worth fighting for. And I could share so many stories of all of the beautiful things that have come to me and that I've been able to give over the course of so many years as a singer and a writer. And I'm happy to share this with you today. If you'd like to connect further, of course, I have a bunch of links below, and I'd love for you to check those out. And I'm happy to say that this video has been sponsored by the Terrence Keller Studio, which is my late uncle's beautiful, beautiful body of work that I'm happy to share. And if you'd like to also discuss the possibility of different forms of mentoring or discussion or counsel in a variety of capacities, please send me an email at k@kclarity.art. I don't have a lot of time for everybody, but I do take people on sometimes, so feel free to send an email. Have a beautiful day.